11.4 learning goal. The student will understand how the area of a circle is related to circumference. So first thing we're going to do before we get right into that is we're going to look back at another one like what you had on last night's homework to make sure you really understand what you were doing. So this one I thought was interesting. So I pulled this image off Google. It says the world's largest coin is a giant gold coin minted in Canada. So I was like, okay, well, what's the biggest coin? Do you guys see what it says on here? What does it say? $1 million. That coin is worth $1 million, and that's a real coin that they made. It says it has a circumference of 61.9 inches and weighs 220 pounds. So that's like a 6-foot tall man. That's how much it weighs, and that would be a lot. What is the area to the nearest square inch of the face of the coin? Use 3.14 for pi. All right, so first thing I always do when I come across word problems is I write down the information they tell me that I need from the problem. What information do I need from this? What information do they tell me that I need, Cassie?
The circumference.
Circumference. So circumference is 61.9 inches. Okay, what else? Isabel?
Use 3.14.
Yep, I'm going to be using 3.14 for pi. Anything else that's important here that I need to know? One more part. D? The weight could be important if I was doing a different type of problem, but on this one, it's just more information. Taken? No, that's going to be my units. Kendall?
The formula for area.
Okay, I might need to know the formula for area. Sure. Okay, so area equals pi r squared. Okay, what else? What else are things I need to know for this problem? Catherine. I'm going to need to know the radius. Does everyone agree with that? I need to know what that is because I need to plug it into my area formula. So I need to figure out what is the radius. What is my ultimate goal here? To find what?
The area.
To find the area. So I might need to write that down, that I need to find area. Okay, these are all things I do when I'm working in problems. All right, so where am I going to start with this now that I have all that information kind of written up there? Where would I start? I have to know the radius. I have to find area. I know the circumference. Dan. Okay, what's our formula? What's our formula? I agree, but we want to know the formula. That would be great.
All right, so there's C equals pi d, and then there's C equals 2 pi r.
Perfect. Don't I also need to know those formulas? Okay, which of those two formulas is going to be the most helpful here?
2 pi.
The 2 pi r, because what am I looking for? The radius, okay? So let's start with the 2 pi r. All right, so circumference equals 2 pi r. Okay, can I fill in C? Yeah, they gave me that, right? 61.9. I'm going to drop down the equals. I'm going to drop down the 2. Do I know what to put in for pi?
Equals.
Good. Do I know what to put in for r? No, so that's what I'm looking for, right? Okay, what would I do next? What? Well, how? What do I do next? Kathy?
Will you subtract 2?
No, not subtract 2. Okay, I'm going to do that in a second. There's probably one step I should do before. Do I know what the one step is before? Yeah, go ahead and multiply these two together. Remember, those are your like terms. Put those, multiply them together. So I have 61.9 equals 6.28, which is 3.14 times 2, then the r. Now, Justin, what do I divide by? Yes, divide both sides by, because this is just a one-step equation, right? Okay, so divide by 6.28. Divide by 6.28. All right, so 61.9 divided by 6.28, which gives me a grand total of 9.856, blah, 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 which I don't need all of that. So let's go with the radius is about 9.86. You need to be careful with rounding. If you would automatically round that to 10 and then use it in your problem, digits is going to count it wrong. So I always say 2 to 3 place values is going to keep your answer more accurate. Okay? All right, now what do I have to do? Because all I just found was the radius. What do I need to do now? Tegan?
Use the area equation.
Yeah, and do you see how I already wrote it out and I already pointed to the R? That lets my brain go, oh, okay, now I just need to plug it back in and find area. So now I'm going to take 9.86 and plug it in right back to my area formula. So it told me to use 3.14 times the area, or the radius is now 9.86, and I want to square it. And that's all I have to do. So I'm going to take 9.86 times 9.86. Oh, I get a pretty big number. And I'm going to times that by 3.14. It looks like I get a grand total of this. What did it tell me to round to? The nearest square root. So how much would that be?
305.
305. The nearest square inch would mean the nearest whole number. So my area would be 305. Did they give me units?
Square.
So inches, square inches. Okay. Does that seem to be a little bit more clear now that you practiced on your worksheet and we went over another one again? Do you feel better about that? Questions about it? Okay. All right. So let's go on. Actually, you know what? Let's do this next one. Let's have you try that one. Let's see if you can do it now. And then I'll teach you the next part. That I need to know, right? I need to find radius first, so I need to use this formula. I'm going to plug in 22 for C. 2 times, what? Oh, this is 3.14 times the radius. So you multiply 2 times 3.14 and get 6.28, right? So we're going to multiply these two together. So 22 equals 6.28 times R, and just divide both sides by 6.28. So what is R equal? How much was it? 3.5? Okay. Yeah, wasn't it like 3.50 or 03 or something? So 3.5 is a good thing to round to on this one. Okay? Now we know radius, so we just have to plug it into our area formula. So area equals pi r squared. So I'm going to say pi is 3.14 times the radius, 3.5, and I'm going to square it. Okay, so 3.5 squared, 3.5 times 3.5 is 12.25 times 3.14, and I get a grand total of 38.465. Did it tell me what to round to? No, so I would probably just keep it that way and then put centimeters squared. I think you could argue different answers for that one since it said approximately. So I think if you wanted to argue, I put 38.5 or I put 38.47, I think you could argue all those answers. Okay, questions? How many of you got that one? Holy cow, over half of us. Okay, so we're definitely getting there. All right, so here's more of today's lesson. And this is the part you need to kind of tune into because once I tell you what it is, it's not that hard, but you got to understand where all these numbers are coming from. Okay, so the first part, I'm going to write down area formula. So area formula is pi r squared, right? Pi r squared. And circumference formula is 2 pi r. Now, see if this makes sense. If I say the radius is 4, and I put the radius of 4 in right here, 4 squared is 16 times pi, 16 pi. Does that make sense? Okay, so now I'll do circumference. If I take 4 and plug it in here, 4 times 2 is 8 pico pi, 8 pi. Make sense? Okay, so what they want you to do is find a relationship between area and circumference. So remember, area is everything inside, circumference is going around. What do you think happens as I increase the area? What's going to happen around the outside? It's also going to get bigger. So just like we found a relationship between circumference and diameter, there is a relationship between the area and the circumference. There's a relationship. We have to figure out what it is. Okay, now let's try the next one then. So let's put in, oh, let me finish that. What happens when you have the same thing over the same thing? What's the same thing over the same thing? What's 3 over 3? What's 2 over 2? 1. What's pi over pi? 1. Right? because isn't it the exact same number over the exact same number? So that cancels out also, which is why a lot of times we leave the pi in there. So the pi's are going to cancel. 16 over 8 reduces to 2 over 1. Okay, so does that first line make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try the next line. So I'm going to plug in a 6. So 6 squared is 36. Keep the pi, and what do I get?
36 pi.
Good. All right. So let's plug in 6 to this. 6 times 2 is keep the pi. Okay. So now I'm going to put the area over circumference. So 36 pi over 12 pi. What happens to the pi's?
Cancel.
They cancel. Cancel, cancel. How many times does 12 go to 36? 3. So this reduces to 3 over 1. Okay, all right, let's try the next line. Let's plug in 8. 8 squared is 64 pi. Let's plug in 8 here. 8 times 2 is 16 pi. Let's put 64 pi over 16 pi. Okay, what happens to the pi's? Cancel out. What does 16 or 64 over 16 reduce to? 4 over 1. Are we seeing a pattern already? Should be. All right, last one, 10. So we plug in 10 right here. 10 squared is 100. So this is 100 pi. Put in 10 to circumference. 10 times 2 is 20. So this is 20 pi. So we're going to put 100 pi over 20 pi. The pi's cancel. 100 over 20 reduces to 5. Okay, so now the question becomes, what is the relationship between the radius and the ratio? The radius and the ratio. What is it, Isabel?
The ratio is half of the
Very good. The ratio is half of the radius. Do you see it? If the radius is 10, the ratio is 5 over 1. Does that make sense? Isn't that kind of crazy how that happens? So here's the new formula, which we'll use a little bit. So area divided by circumference always gives us 1/2 of the radius. Area over circumference, which is what we did every time, gives us half of the radius. That kind of makes sense a little bit? Even if it's a decimal, no matter what it is. I think all the ones you're going to be working with are going to be whole numbers, though. They're going to try to keep it pretty easy. Make sure you understand. Okay, so let's try the first question here and see if we can do this. I'm going to leave this little formula here, so you might want to write it down again. All right, and this is what we're working with. Okay, the ratio of the area of a circle to the circumference. So right here, they're saying A over C is 11 over 1. What is the circumference of the circle? Okay, so in order to find circumference, I either need to know diameter or radius. Make sense? What does this formula give me? Radius, right? Okay, so see if this makes sense. See if this makes sense. Okay, so A over C is 11 over 1. 11 over 1 equals half of the radius. So what does the radius have to be to take half of it to get 11? 22. Does that make sense? You don't even have to do the math. Blank times a half would be 11. What's the blank? 2.
1.
Okay, what did I just say? 1. My board's one, that's it. Oh, my board. Alright. What does the blank have to be? I'm asking it again. What is the blank times a half to get 11? What does the blank have to be? 22. What's half of 22? 11. Does that make sense? You don't even have to do any work, right? Radius has to be 22 in order for the ratio to be 11 over 1. Because what did we just say a second ago? Wasn't this half of this? Okay, so we're just kind of doing it in reverse. All right, so that means you just told me the radius is 22. How would I find circumference? This is the easy part. How do I find circumference? C. Yes. 2 pi r. What did it tell me to leave in for pi?